All right. So I have Renee here with me, and I'm
Hi,
so excited.
me too.
I knew from the minute I saw your live that you posted online in our group, I saw it. I'm like, soul sister right there.
Yep, you just
Everything
know.
coming out of, yeah, everything coming out of your mouth. I'm like, that's me. I
Yep,
do that too. Yes, that's
yes,
me.
yes, yes.
So I'm so excited that you are my first guest.
Me too. I'm
Um,
so grateful. Thank you so much for asking me. It's
oh,
quite
my,
an honor.
well, the honor is mine, believe me, because when I thought well, first, I never ever thought I would do a podcast. That was never on my radar. And then when I'm like, maybe I could do this. And when I thought about it right away after we had spoken and we had done some things together, I thought, she needs to be the first person I call on, right?
I
Especially with
love
the
it.
topic we're going to touch on about communication, and
Yeah,
you are the expert. And I thought this was a great segue into this world, venturing
totally,
into podcasting for me.
totally.
And for both of us coming from our backgrounds to where we're heading now is so exciting.
Yep,
How it's been a smooth entry, I think, for both
absolutely.
of us, and how our transitions are happening. So let's start with you telling us a little bit about you and your journey that got you to where you are here today. I know your background, and of course I
Yeah,
have it in
of
your
course.
bio, but let's hear from you.
Great. So the beginning, most important, right? So I have been a performer my whole life, since 5 years old. I started dancing and singing and all of that. And, I realized at 8 years old when I did my first musical that I was like, oh, I love this. A lot of people ask me, like, when was the moment? And I'm like, I guess if I had to pick one moment where I was like, this is it, it probably when I was I'd say, yeah, 8 years old, and I stepped on the stage for the first time, and it just felt so natural. It wasn't like I even had to make the decision. It's like the decision was made for me. And
Yeah.
then, just continued on and did all the shows in high school. And then when it came time for choosing a college, everyone had said to me, like, you need to have something to fall back on. And, performing is such a, tough career. And I was like, nope, I'm going to do it. And I did it. And those 4 years I went to Wagner College in Staten Island, New York, and it was some of the best years of my life. As a performer, it feels so good to be in a safe space, where you could explore your training and fall on your face and get feedback. So that's what it was for me.
Can I ask you a question about
Yeah,
that? Just, I went to theater school as well. I
yeah,
went to Ryerson Theater School, and I found, I mean, the program was great,
yeah,
but I learned so much about me in
yes,
that time from what
totally.
they were putting us through. And well, it makes it sound like they were torturing us, but
Yeah.
I was with the same classmates for the 3 years of our program,
Hmm.
and I felt it was a journey as an actor, but man, did I learn about myself and my vulnerabilities and
Oh,
my
yeah,
inhibitions and all these things, and
totally.
how some of that needed to come down, some of those walls needed to come
Totally.
down.
And it's funny, but when I think about communication and like my love and passion for communication, I mean, it started, in college, talking about what you just said. I mean, that's all about communicating with yourself, right? Like realizing like, oh, I have these walls. And, I remember being in acting class and my acting teacher was like, you have such a strong, like, emotional vessel. I could cry on the drop of a hat. And I'm like, that's because I'm so emotional. Even, till this day, like, that's part of my personality. But I remember that being like the realization, the first time that it was like a realization. And I was like, oh, and as an actor, I can draw on this, right? Like,
Yeah.
back to communication again. Like, I feel like that foundational thing that we all, you know, deal with every day in our lives, but we're not aware of it. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so college was amazing. And I started auditioning my final semester, and I booked the lead singer in a casino show in Biloxi, Mississippi. Woo! And I was like, I didn't even know where Biloxi was, but I was like, I'm gonna be singing in a casino. And my mom was like crying. She's like, where's Biloxi with a V? And I was like, I don't think that's it. And she like pictured me going to live in swamps somewhere. And then when she came to visit me, she was like, oh, this is great. I love this. She loves like gambling. So she's like, this is great. So I did that. And that was my first, diving into the professional world. And I'll never forget, I got my first paycheck and I sat on my balcony in my room and like overlooking the Gulf. And I called my mom and I was like, do you see why I do this? I just got paid to do what I love. Like I do it for free. And that was, kind of like the stamp on it for me where I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. This is what I love. So fast forward, did that for 3.5 months, came back home. And during the day I was a substitute teacher at my old high school, which was crazy, right? I like was just on the other side and I was like, oh, I thought I was so grown in high school. I wasn't grown at all.
Life lesson.
Yep. So did that. And then I booked the 25th anniversary tour of Cats, non-equity. And I was a swing covering 6 cats. And Diva, that was some of the best training that I could ever ask for. I mean,
have no doubt.
Touring around North America for a year, bus and truck, like on a bus for 14 hours, then getting off and like, having to be a cat on stage. Like it was the best training I could have received. And after I did that show, I felt like there was nothing I couldn't do. So from there, I was like, I want to get my equity card now. So turned down a bunch of jobs, and then Disney's High School Musical, the stage version, was being born, and I was cast in that, and I got my equity card, and I was so excited. And then I continued to tour with them, and I decided to leave after like 9 months because, my goal was always Broadway. And I said to myself, as much as like I love this tour, I'm making great money, my goal is Broadway. I've got to go back to New York. Everyone thought I was nuts because they're like, why are you leaving? This job's like amazing. You're getting paid well. And I was like, no, it's not about the money, right? It's about what I want to do in my career. So went back to New York, and a month later I booked Jersey Boys, the amazing, 14-year running show that had several companies. So I was what they call the Universal Swing. So I covered the Chicago company, the tour, and Vegas. So for 6 months they'd fly me wherever they needed me, and I covered all the girls in the show. So that was incredible. And then the role opened up of Mary Delgado on the national tour. So then I moved into the role, did that for a year. And again, that role was like a dream come true for me, but I was like, okay, time to go back to New York again. Still haven't gotten my Broadway debut. Again, everyone thought I was crazy. And went back to New York, auditioning a ton. And then while I was on the Jersey Boys tour, I had, a day where I went back to New York to audition for West Side Story, the revival. And I had made it down to like the last 4 girls for a replacement. And I didn't get it that time, but the casting director was like, listen, we know, we love you. We want you in the show at some point, but not yet. So a few months after I left the Jersey Boys tour, I was actually in an audition for Oklahoma at this regional theater. And it was the same casting director as for West Side Story. And after the callback, he calls me in the office and he's like, Renee, do you sing soprano? And I was like, yeah. And in my head, I was thinking, so interesting. I don't picture myself as a Lori in Oklahoma. Like, oh, but okay. And then he's like, we need you as a replacement for West Side Story on Broadway. And I was like, oh my God, I think I just peed my pants. And I went to the theater that night, Diva, to watch the show, started rehearsal the next day, had a day and a half more of rehearsals, and then I had my Broadway debut.
God.
Before anybody was ready for it. That show's so difficult. So a lot of people, unfortunately got injured. And thank goodness, I'm very proactive. Like, I was at the theater on Tuesday night. I didn't have rehearsal that day, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the theater, do like a ballet bar, warm up. Good thing I did. The stage manager comes out and is like, hey, Renee, how about an early rehearsal tomorrow morning before the matinee? I think you're going to be on for the matinee. And I'm like, didn't even finish learning the choreography yet. I was in the theater, not the theater, a rehearsal space at 10 a.m., learned the rest of America, and was on stage for my Broadway debut at the matinee.
So, sorry, how many days in between from the time you saw the show, like started
3 days.
rehearsals? 3 days. So
3 days.
everybody right now who's ever done any theater or any community theater production, professional, doesn't matter, everybody can understand the insanity of
Yes.
you learning the choreography in 3 days, let alone everything else
Yeah.
that you need to learn in the show.
Literally just insane. And I'll never forget, Diva, of course, in that particular role I was in, I was covering one of the Shark Girls. I was the first one, when everyone enters for dance at the gym, I was the first one to like Shanae out. And I just remember being in the wing and like looking up to the heavens, and I was like, all right, here we go. And I just Shanae'd out. And I'll never forget, like, after the matinee, I remember posting on Facebook. Now, mind you, Diva, no one knows I'm having my Broadway debut. Like, I barely had a second to like tell my mom and dad, so they weren't even at the show. And I posted, I'm like, oh my God, so excited! Just had my Broadway debut, and everyone's like, huh? What? Jersey Boys? And I was like, no, West Side Story. Everyone's like, wait, what? So that's just, I love that story, because it's like, it's just the quintessential realization of how this business truly is, right? You can't ever be too prepared, and you're always going to get thrown for a loop, and it's like being flexible enough, right, to just kind of go with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, that it's a life lesson too. Life throws things at you and you don't expect them, obviously.
100%.
And it's about what you do with that curveball.
Yeah. And it's so funny, right? When you think of it in like life things, so much of what we go through sometimes is us resisting and like pushing back against what's happening, instead of being like, okay, maybe this sucks, but what can I do? Let me try acceptance, and then we could pivot from there and see where it takes us. But I'm learning this now, like so much of it is our resistance to things. So yeah, that now in hindsight, realizing that has prepared me for so much in life, just
Yeah.
that one experience. So that show was, incredible. I did it for the last 9 months that it was open, and I covered, all the Shark Ensemble girls. I also covered the Jet Girls, and same thing had to go on for Cool with the Jet Girls with learning it the day before. Like, it was a crazy. And then one day I was in rehearsal, and my good friend Jennifer Sanchez, who played Rosalia, who sings America with Anita, she was leaving to do another show, and Arthur Lawrence, the director, saw me in a rehearsal, and he was like, you know what, can Renee cover the role until we find someone? And I did that for like a few weeks, and then he asked me to take over the role, which was really awesome. So I got to play Rosalia and sing America for the last, like 5 months. It was amazing. It really was incredible. So did that, and then started auditioning again the last few months of that show, and I booked a brand new musical on Broadway called Wonderland. And again, for me, this was an original Broadway company, which I had never done, originated something, but I was going to be a swing again, which wasn't, what my goal was, but I was like, this is still checking a box, it's an original Broadway company.
Mm-hmm.
And Diva, I covered 9 roles.
Oh my gosh.
The show closed after a month total. Talk about life lessons, girl. I was laying in my room on a Tuesday, and I get this phone number. I'll never forget this. And the area code was 918, which is my birthday. So we were just talking about signs, right? So
Yeah.
I wake up from the nap, and I'm like, oh my God, 918. This is a good luck call. And I was like, hello. And it's like this man's voice, very somber. And I was like, hello. And it was one of our producers, and he's like, Renee. And I'm like, oh my God, am I fired? Like, the first thought, I was like, why does he sound so down? He's like, I hate to tell you this, but we're closing on Sunday. It was Tuesday. And I was like, what is happening? So, again, life lessons. Theater sure will prepare you for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, did a bunch of workshops, things like that. And a workshop came around called Becoming Chaplain, which I was a part of. And then that became the Broadway musical Chaplin. So I continued on with that. Beautiful, beautiful show. Did that for 6 months. Hurricane Sandy hit. So then, the show was doing so great. They opened up ticket sales, and then it was like, oops, sorry, no one has homes right now. No one's coming to a Broadway show. So then we closed. Crazy, crazy, crazy. But luckily, right at that time, one of the girls from Jersey Boys who played Mary Delgado, she was going on a maternity leave. So, I had heard about it and, spoke to the assistant director and let him know that I would love to be considered for the role. And then I got to play the role of Mary on Broadway, which was like, for me, so special, because you have to understand, I'm really from New Jersey. I grew up listening to the Four Seasons. Like the storyline literally takes place like down like a few miles from my house where I grew up. So it's all just very, special. And that was incredible. And that took me to, kind of one of the greatest moments of my life. I had told you about this, but we had been hearing through the grapevine that they were auditioning for the film of Jersey Boys. And in my mind, I was like, didn't even like think twice. I was like, they're going to hire, A-list celebrities, like, some like a Marissa Tomei is going to play Mary Delgado. I didn't even think twice. Then one Sunday matinee, Clint Eastwood was in the audience, and I was like, who would be directing the film? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And we had, we found out that he was going around to all the different casts to see the companies because he really wanted to cast people who had done these roles. So great. It was a great show. Didn't think anything of it again. And then they started calling people in from our show to audition. And now I'm like, okay, I'd love to be in, for any role, really. I was like, I don't care if I'm a tree in the movie, but like, this would be great. So I talked to my agent, and she's like, I'm on it. We'll try to get you in there. And then they put out a breakdown for the role of Mary Delgado. And for those of you listening, if you don't know what a breakdown is, it's basically a character description of the role. So picture I'm playing this role on Broadway at the time. So now I'm really like, wait a second. So I tell my agent again, I'm like, listen, they just put out a breakdown for the role. I'd love to be in for Mary, the role of Mary. Well, a few weeks go by, she calls me, she's like, Renee, I don't know what it is. Like, they won't see you for the role of Mary Delgado. And I'm like, wait, if I can't even get an appointment for a role that I'm playing on Broadway, there's something wrong, or I'm doing something wrong, right?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they wouldn't. But they were going to see me as one of the angels who sing My Boyfriend's Back. So at that point, I like threw my hands up. I was like, all right, well, it is what it is. I'll still go in and audition. I go in that day. The casting director and I are talking, and Jeffrey McClady's amazing. And he was saying how much he loved the show. He had seen it the previous night. And I'm talking about how I'm really from New Jersey. And then he goes, okay, great. Would you like to sing My Boyfriend's Back first or read the scene? And I look at him and I go, I was really hoping to come in and read for the role of Mary Delgado. And I'm like, what's he going to say? And he looks at me and he's like, I was just thinking the same thing. And I'm like, awesome, great. And he's like, okay, so you could sing and read for the angels, and then do you want to come back another day and do Mary? And I was like, no, I'm doing it today. I'm not leaving this building. So he gave me 20 minutes. I went over the scenes in the hallway, came back in, auditioned, and honest to goodness, I just felt so happy that day because I got the chance, right? I got the chance to just audition, because it wasn't about getting the role or not. That wasn't even on my radar, but I knew if this film came out and I didn't have an opportunity, that would have killed me, just because it was a role that was very close to home for me. So,
and to interlude, how many times in somebody's life have we said, oh, I so wanted to say something, but I didn't, and they regret it. Right? Yes. They regret, because what's the worst possible thing that can happen if you ask? No.
But you know what, Diva? And that's the thing. And this is why I teach and love communication so well, because this is something that's so simple, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
think about it. I could have not said anything, and then I wouldn't have done it, and I've walked away with probably years of regret, right? Years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Instead of just opening my mouth like I did, and even, guess what? Even if he said no, at least I know I tried, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I still wouldn't have had regrets, because I'd be like, listen, I did everything I could. I talked to my agent.
Mm-hmm.
I asked my agent again. I asked in the room. They said no, it wasn't meant to be. So for me, that's so important, to not
Mm-hmm.
have to live with regret if you can, if you could have controlled the situation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Can I, sorry, I'm going to interlude again,
Yes.
only
No,
because
please.
I didn't share this with you last time, but I understand that feeling, because when I was up for the role of Tracy Turnblad in Toronto with
Mhm.
Mirvish Productions, um, I was getting a lot of support from a lot of people, and they're like, you should go down to New York and audition. And I, I couldn't just get up and go
Yeah.
and crash an audition. I didn't even know where to begin with that in New York. But what I did do is I sent a package to Bernard Telsey. And in the package, I had a recording of me singing the song. I had video, I had pictures, my resume.
Yeah.
And I put a letter in there on like pink stationery, signed by Tracy herself, who said, my friend Diva would be perfect to play me on Broadway.
That's amazing.
And I sent it to them, and they called. And I ended up down in New York. I was one of the 3 that they were bringing in for the finals. And if I hadn't sort of put myself out there and said, well, what's the worst that can happen? And,
Eva, I have chills, but you see what I'm saying? You guys, everybody listening, please listen so well, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like,
mhm,
what you did it. You know what you did? You authentically communicated. You wrote a letter with postage, sent it, right?
mhm,
Nowadays, we kind of don't do that as much anymore. Why? Because look, we're on a Zoom call or we text each other. And as great as that is, nothing replaces that old school simplicity.
mhm,
Nothing.
mhm,
Because that Bernard Telsey, right? Let me
mhm,
tell you, he casts everything.
mhm.
He sees a
I
million
know.
hours a day, okay? The fact is, he saw you and your handwriting and the personal touch on that. And that sets you apart. And it's the exact same thing that I did in the room, right?
Mhm,
I was like, listen, this is me speaking from my heart to you. You could
yeah.
take it or you can leave it, right? But I'm not going to beat myself up for the rest of my life when, some other girl is playing the role that maybe I would have had a chance of playing, right?
Absolutely, which obviously worked in your favor
Yes,
because it was in your bio. Guess who
yes,
played the part in the movie?
yes. But this is the best part, you guys. Like, so I go away that day feeling on cloud 9. Honestly, just because I had the chance, and I felt so, you know why? This is the biggest thing. I
Mhm.
felt so proud of myself for taking my life in my own hands, right?
Yes,
We are in,
yes.
all of us, no matter what business, it's so easy to feel like everybody else tells us when we can do what we have to do. It feels like sometimes we're puppets in our own life, right?
Mhm,
And like, we have our bosses are our puppeteers, and
mhm.
maybe like our families are our puppeteers, where sometimes it feels like, we really are the side story in our own lives.
Yeah, there's
So
expectations from your family, there's social
yes,
mores, there's, what
yes,
society thinks is what's right, these
100%.
limited beliefs that are put on us, and we
Yes,
follow them because we think we don't have a choice.
yeah.
Mhm.
So to complete this story, because I feel like this is the best part. So I go home, back to New York. I'm living in New York doing the show. Hilarious. I like go back that night to play Mary Delgado, and I'm like, remember this? How I couldn't get an audition for this same role. So anyway, 2 weeks go by. I'm at my childhood home in New Jersey. Everybody, down the street from where the storyline takes place. And my mom, my dad, and my grandmother and myself were about to leave for my brother's wedding. And my agent calls. So I go in my little childhood bedroom with, like, the TVs with the VCR, like
Yeah.
both of them. That was what was in there. And I pick up the phone and she goes, "You're Mary Delgado in the movie. Clint Eastwood loved you." And I was like, "What?" like a crazy person. I run out of the room hysterically crying up. My mom's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I'm gonna be in a movie. My dad's like crying with me, and my grandmother's like, I've been praying for this for years.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was just like, holy moly. Like, I didn't even know what to think. So then fast forward the first day on set. I have never been on a film set before. I have done theater my whole life, right? Never stepped foot on a set.
That's a totally different ball game too.
Oh my God, it's like, it couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
But I remember being in the van on the way to set for the first day in my first Mary Delgado dress for the first scene. And it felt like the same day that I had my Broadway debut, you know, with no rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
And that same thing, I like looked up to the heavens and I was like, well, here we go. It was the same thing. So I'll never forget walking in that day. It was the most wonderful group of people. Clint Eastwood has the best team of people, not because they're the most talented. They are incredibly talented, but they are such nice, genuine people. So for me, I'm such a family person. It felt like I was being welcomed into the family.
Mm-hmm.
And Clint himself comes up to me. I can I still get chills because it feels like it was so surreal. He's like, you know, I went around to all the different casts, but nobody was in your class. And then you came in and put yourself on tape, and it was the icing on the cake. And I was like, oh, literally like holding back tears. I'm like, this is Clint Eastwood, like a legend, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
So another thing which I want to impress upon everyone listening, I was like a sponge during this film, right? It was my first time. For me, I'm the type of person, I want to soak up every experience. Mm-hmm. So Clint and I would eat lunch together literally every time I filmed. And I would ask him questions and I'd be like, Clint, what was it like when you started acting? Clint, blah, blah, blah. Do you have an agent? What was this? And like, he was such a mentor to me. And as we're filming, it's like weeks in now, and it's he, Clint Eastwood, myself, and one of the executive producers. And they happen to be talking about how Clint knew he wanted me for the role when he saw me on Broadway. And I go, oh, do you guys want to hear a really funny story? I couldn't get an appointment to come in for Mary Delgado. And they were like, wait, what are you talking about? We requested you. And I'm like, oh, did ya? Well, this little one had to fight her way in. I said, and the only reason I auditioned is because I opened up my big trap. And they're all like, huh, what? Come to find out, as human error can happen, there was just some casting associate, you know, kind of juggling several films at once and just dropped the ball. So like, the moral of the story, everyone, is if I did not open up my mouth and communicate, I could have missed out on the best opportunity of my life to this day. Like, isn't that crazy? Like,
totally.
That's all it took, Diva. Like, not all it took, but that took a lot. But like, that's something so simple that so many of us miss because, like you said before, fear holds us back, right? Oh, I don't want to sound, you know, I don't want people to think I'm too much, or no, I'm not good enough. Why would I open up my mouth? Or whatever the fear is that holds us back. Like, it doesn't just hold us back, but it causes stress. It causes us missed opportunities, and it causes us a waste of time.
And like, regret is the most horrible thing to carry around.
Yes, it's the worst. It's the absolute worst.
Yeah. I learned very early in my life, whenever I was afraid to do something, I created this motto for myself, and it stuck with me. And it all came about from, I was on a high diving board at a public pool, and there was a huge lineup behind me. And of course I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And I get up there, I'm like, oh, no, I'm not. And then I had no recourse. There was no way for me to get back down because there were kids up the ladder. There was nobody policing it like they do now at public pools. And I thought, I have no way down. And so I'm like, all right. And so I counted to 3, but I literally jumped on 2. So I was in the air when my brain got to 3. So I was already in motion before my brain caught up. So my motto has always been count to 3, jump on 2.
I love it. And you know what, like, dude, that's that's so like connected to what I've been teaching a lot, which is like just taking action, right? The
Mm-hmm.
thing we do all the time, and I say we because it's me. This is why I could teach about this, because I do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
can I feel like the best teachers are the ones who go through it. Or else who
Oh
am I to,
yeah.
right? Who am I to teach anybody? But what I've realized is my best moments have been when I just took action. Leap and the net will appear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what's easy to do, and the human like commonality, is that we negotiate with ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't do that, Diva, right? You probably were already starting to do it. You're like, well, I mean, I can't jump because what if I jump? Maybe I should just go down. And you start the dialogue of talking yourself out of it. Where if we get into
Mm-hmm.
a habit of saying, you know what, I'm just going to do it. You know what? I'm scared. I'm going to do it anyway. Because the truth is, courage is not courage without fear attached.
Yeah.
Everything I've done in my life that has been, I think, like a big accomplishment, it all had fear attached to it. Like all of it,
Totally.
but
Yeah.
I did it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the thing I want everybody to really understand, because I know even for myself as a perfectionist, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is what will hold you back all day, every day. Because
Yeah.
if you're waiting for the perfect opportunity to be in the perfect mood at the perfect time in the perfect outfit, it never happens.
Mm-mm.
And all it does is, again, causes more stress on your system, because you're like, but wait, but, and it's like, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when you jump, and if you fall, and you're going to learn something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's way more than if you didn't take the opportunity at all and you sat there negotiating with yourself for hours or days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I had a friend years ago who met her, well, now husband, and she met him by accident because he went to the wrong house or something like that. And she was painting. She hadn't washed her hair. She was grubby. And there was something, an instant connection. And she's like, all this time I've been like doing my hair, doing my
Yes,
makeup to go
yes,
and meet somebody and go out on a date. And the guy I meet sees me at my worst
yep.
and
And
still
thinks
wants to
he's
be
the
with
best.
me.
Yep.
Right? It was like, okay, well, hey, nice to
That's
meet
it.
you. There we go.
Diva, if we could all, and I know sometimes it sounds like, oh, like it's so easy, but if we could all learn the skill of just being so authentically ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would do wonders for our lives. Because
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like your friend, here she is, she got pushed into her own authenticity because she didn't even think she was going to see anybody, but there she was, kind of in her own skin, and he fell in love with her. Like, I love that
Mm-hmm.
story because it all goes back to authenticity. And when we communicate fully and honestly, that's what we're doing, is we're being authentic with ourselves and then with each
Mm-hmm.
other. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's no room for error, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when we're in authenticity and we're putting that energy out, that is what it ultimately attracts people into
That's
our
it.
lives,
That's it. Like
right?
attracts like, right? Like,
Yes, yeah.
look, like you knew that, like, we were like soul sisters because you felt my energy in the video, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah, and honey, you have so much energy.
but you know what I
So
mean?
awesome.
But naturally, like, you felt that. And what I think some of us forget sometimes is, because we're in this age of what I call new school technology, right? We're
Mhm.
in this age of computers and phones and Zoom calls and this and lights and filters and blah blah blah. Like, we forget that energy is, we feel that before we see anybody. Energy is like what we carry almost before the actual person is there. And it's,
Absolutely. It's that same feeling when you see somebody face to face and the hair on the back of your neck stands up or something doesn't sit right with you. Your
yes,
instincts are saying something is not jiving with this person's energy and mine.
yeah,
That and you are uncomfortable, you walk away, or
yep,
you make
yep,
choices that are different than what you were planning. And the same thing is true where you meet somebody and there's an energy flow between the two, and you
yes,
just feel like you've known them your whole life.
yes.
So energy is huge. There was an exercise in a course I did once, and she was talking about the aura and sort of the energy that we put out. And she said, do an experiment. And when you're in a crowd or in a lineup, expand your aura. Like, think about expanding your energy and see what happens. And then alternately bring it in and see how people
I love
react
that.
differently too. And it's super interesting if you try it.
I love that. You
Yeah.
know, and again, like, it's so easy nowadays to forget that, because, like, look, I'm here in New Jersey, you're in Canada. Like, it's easy to feel like we're still just in our own bubbles, right? Like,
Right.
or we're behind our phone, like hunched over texting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we forget these things. Like, we forget that, you know, what I believe is, like, we're spirits having a human experience. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, when you tap into that, and you tap into that authentic spirit, like, magic happens, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
like, going back to my story, like, I was just so authentic in that room that day. Like, I was being honest. I said, listen, this is what I was hoping, you know. Obviously you have the freedom to say yes or no, but
Mm-hmm.
it was like, I have to say this before I do anything else. This is what I was thinking. And listen, it worked out, right? It worked out, I believe, because first of all, you know, it was meant to be, but second of all, he could feel my energy, and, like,
Mm-hmm.
he
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this does make sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in my case, I didn't get the part, but I was okay with that because I went into that audition and I threw down the gauntlet. I felt like $1,000,000, that
That's all
there
you
was
need to feel.
nothing I regretted in what I did. And I left that room thinking whatever happens is meant to happen. And I'm okay with that. And I very secretly did a little trick. I wore a shirt under my shirt.
Yeah.
I had this t-shirt on underneath the outfit that I was wearing, and it said, Canadian girls kick ass.
Yeah.
And that was for me, right? That was for me to go, haha, I have a secret. You don't know what it is.
Yep.
And so
That's it.
I felt so powerful when I walked out of that room because I took my fate into my hands and I sent that package and I went to New York and I got my Broadway audition. And, you know, it didn't result in anything, but you know what?
No, but no.
How many people can say they got their Broadway audition even? And so
And
I'm proud of that moment.
Diva, it didn't result in nothing. It
No,
resulted
sorry. Yeah.
because you know what? Like, again, my story again isn't about getting the job or not, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The point of what is powerful to me is that I just gave myself the chance.
Yeah.
And especially in the business of performing and theater and entertainment, you know, there's so much that's out of your control. Like,
Mm-hmm.
literally, even me with my career, you know, after, you know, doing the film, I did a TV show, I lived out in LA, came back, and I've been doing, the last show I did was Pretty Woman on Broadway.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I was you know, in the show, 8 shows a week, you know, one of the ensemble members, but I was also the dance captain and assistant to the choreographer. So what was amazing is now I'm getting to be on the other side of the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Helping to run auditions,
Yeah.
and having that perspective makes you realize that so much of it isn't about your talent, it's not about your looks, it's just what they need
Mm-hmm.
at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So again, what we believe, you know, as theater performers, in the wins, I feel like when I was young, you think the win is just if you get the job, and it's like, no, you know what the win is?
Mm-mm.
If you walk out of that room getting a call back or not, but you feel like you put it all out on the table
Mm-hmm.
and you did your best, that is the win,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It, it's
That's the win.
it's like when you ask the question, what is your definition of success? Is it becoming a famous actor? Or is it all the other things that, you know, the people you meet and the cool things that happen as a result, or the cool,
Oh yeah.
you know, relationships that form? And you know, you often look back and go, actually, I'm kind of glad that it worked out the way it did. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done A, B, and C afterwards, and I wouldn't have met these people. And,
Totally.
you know, so everything
Totally.
happens for a reason.
100%.
So it sort of goes back to that definition of success, and it's different for everybody.
It is different for everybody. Absolutely. And there's not one path, there's not one way. You know, it all is in staying true to yourself and your journey. And, you know, I feel like the biggest gift that any of us can offer to the world is just being so truly ourselves that
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing else to worry about, really.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
feel like, again, just using this business as an example, so often we, especially as a younger performer, when you're just learning, you think like, oh my God, I'm going in for this role. And like, they need her to like be a little bit older and like be the, and then you walk in the room and you're like kind of like playing it up. And it's like, no, 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 no. Be
Mm-hmm.
the best you can be.
Mm-hmm.
You may not get the job, but they're going to look at you and be like, listen, this girl's not right for this role, but I just love her. And like, there's something about her. I'm going to find a role for her somewhere. And it
Yes.
happens all the time.
Yep, absolutely. I've seen it happen to other people. It's happened to me with casting directors.
Yes.
And, we've talked about this before too, you and I, when we've had conversations, that if anything you do is about relationships, and it's about the relationships that you form. And some people call it networking, but networking sounds so negative. Like, it sounds like you have ulterior motives, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
But when you're truly forming relationships and you keep showing up and you keep being authentic, then absolutely those people are going to seek you out for something, because they like what you're bringing to the table, or they like how you're presenting yourself, and they're like, yeah, you know what, I want to work with that person someday.
Yeah.
I had a friend who auditioned for Rent back in theater school, and he had like 15, 16 auditions,
Oh,
and
wow.
constantly being called back, called back, called back, called back. But it just never came to fruition.
Yeah.
But guess who they called when Lion King came?
There
And
you go.
he ended up playing Simba.
Exactly.
So it's amazing when you put yourself out there. Just have
Yes.
faith.
Keep
And I think,
showing up. Yeah. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I wish I could, I just want everyone to really get this, because it's so, I wish I knew this, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
asked me a question like, what would you tell your younger self? And it's like, that,
Mm-hmm.
be so authentically yourself. Don't worry about, you know, like thinking that it has to be a little more of this or a little more of that. No, just be so grounded in your own self that
Yeah.
you can only win from there.
Yeah.
And again, when I say win, I don't mean you're getting the job. I mean you are like stating your claim right there. You're like, this is who I am. This is what I bring to the table. I honor myself. I love myself. And if you're on board, great. If you're not, you're not for me. And like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
again, that's a win, because you want to know off the bat, like who your people are going to be and who they're not going to be. And they're not
Absolutely.
everyone's going to love me. Not everyone's going to love you, but when you find your chosen family, boy, those people are with you for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
And it all goes back to being in communication with yourself, to know
Mm-hmm.
yourself, because the stronger that is, the stronger your relationships with other people are.
Yeah.
Like, think about people that all of us have met, that you're like, they're great, but like, I don't think they know who they are, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel like they kind of, I don't know who they are because they don't know who they are. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Or they're trying to please everybody
yes,
to
yeah, yeah,
the detriment of themselves, the relationship with
100%.
themselves.
Totally, totally.
Hmm. So what would you say then to somebody, because some people have a hard time expressing their feelings, or tapping into that, because it's a hard relationship to develop,
It's a
right?
hard, yeah.
We've all struggled with that relationship with self, right? It's either denial, you avoid, there are things you just don't want to deal with when
Yes.
it comes to who you are, or
Yeah.
sometimes looking in the mirror is difficult. So, you know, what steps or what kinds of things do you think are a good starting place for people who have this difficulty in, like you said, communicating with self, because that has to be established before
Totally.
these solid relationships can form.
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that, because first and foremost, what I teach, and I think this is so powerful, everybody, you guys, it's so powerful and it's so simple. And by simple, I mean, I'm not giving you steps where I'm like, okay, so guys, you have to go away for 6 weeks alone in the woods. You have to, right? No. I
Yeah.
mean, and listen, there may be something to that, and that's great. but I'm all about simple, easy to implement steps in your life now, right? You know, it's hard to, sometimes when, we take courses or we take, retreats, it feels like a big thing, right? Like, it's like, oh my God, like I have to, whatever it may be, not eat bread for, 4 months before I, whatever. And, that works for some retreats and courses that you may take. But for me, I want it to be where you're incorporating it into your life, right? So first and foremost, the best way to communicate with yourself, even if it's, listen, you've had traumas, which we all have, things are it's hard to look in the mirror and see things. What I suggest doing is taking out a journal. If you don't have a journal, take a piece of paper and a pen. But I really, really advise writing. Even if you're someone who you're like, I don't like writing, just do it. Because the computer's great, but there's a different dynamic. And it's very, very simple. When you wake up in the morning, take 5 to 10 minutes. I know you guys, we are all busy. We have moms, dads, people taking care of, several other people in their lives, jobs. But the truth is, if we don't have the ability to take 5 to 10 minutes for ourselves in the morning, where it's most important to set our structure for the day, then we're going to be no good to take care of anyone else, right? We have to, self-care is not selfish, right?
Yes,
It's actually selfless. Because I know when I've taken good care of myself, I am there for my husband, I'm there for my mom, I feel good, I'm in a good space. When I have not taken 5 to 10 minutes, it's not good, because then I'm playing catch up with myself all day.
Well, and it's like they tell you on an airplane, right? If the oxygen masks come down, put it on yourself first, then help other people. Because if you pass out, you're not good to anybody else. It's the same thing, right?
Same thing, exactly. So take out a pen and paper and take 5 to 10 minutes. Go in a room, a bathroom, wherever you could be alone, and simply ask yourself this: how am I feeling? That's it. And let yourself free write for 5 minutes. Even if it's, guys, if that's too much, 3 minutes, whatever it is, but let yourself just go. Free write, but with that question in mind. And why is this powerful? Because when we write, it's like, it's very cathartic. And what often happens, speaking from experience, after the 5 minutes is up, you'll like look back at the page and you're like, oh, I didn't even realize I was feeling like that, right? Like things will come up like from your subconscious and you're like, oh, apparently I got to deal with that, And then go about your day and just let it be, right? You wrote it, great. Before bed, same thing. This is so, so important, because before bed, if any of you are like me, you have a million thoughts running in your head that usually keep you awake. And by asking again, how am I feeling? You take the 5 to 10 minutes, you free write. And it's beautiful because often a lot of things are revealed in that. Like if you had a day where, you realize you like lashed out at your kid or your husband, and then you start writing and sometimes you realize, wow, why did I do that? Like I wasn't even upset with her. Like, and you realize, oh, I'm actually still upset because of A, B, and C. Right. And it allows you to get it out, get it the heck out of your brain, put it in your little notepad and go to sleep. It's going to help you sleep better. And it's going to just help you get into this habit of like releasing. Because the hardest thing for us, especially when you're dealing with trauma and, not wanting to face things, what you do is you keep pushing it down in your body, right? And you're like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm fine. I'm so fine. I'm fine. Until that day comes where you're like, right? And you just either explode or you break down or you slap somebody in the face, whatever it may be. Pushing it down and not facing it is the worst thing we can do for ourselves. So that's the practice, you guys. Journal 5 minutes in the morning and at night. Try it for a week, okay? Take that time for yourself. And what you're going to feel too is it starts your day off in a better place because you've gotten in touch with yourself. And even if it's like scary, at least you did it. And then you can celebrate that. Like, listen, this is really hard for me. Diva, I know we were talking last time we spoke about like, people who are dealing with PTSD. I know
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes that anxiety is so overbearing that maybe even taking out the pen is a lot for them, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a win.
So win. So guess what? If you are someone who's dealing with that, you take out that pen, and even if it's too much to write for that moment, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Honor yourself for taking the pen out.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to celebrate that in
Mm-hmm.
whatever way you can. Tap yourself on the shoulder. You know what, Renee? You did it. Good job. Because we spend so much of our lives beating ourselves up and looking at all the things we can't do and we won't do. And when we take one moment to celebrate ourselves, oh my God,
Yeah.
it makes such a difference.
Yeah. I had my doctor say to me one time, if you reverse this and somebody else was telling you that this is how they were feeling, what would you say to them?
Yes.
Would you be hard on them like you are on yourself? And you're like, yeah, but no.
I know.
Right?
I
Because
always
we
say,
wouldn't. We'd be saying, no, you did it. You picked up the pen today. You
yep,
got out of bed. Yay, good for
yes,
you.
yes.
Right?
And that's so important. Like I can't, and again, I'm telling you all this as I'm saying it to myself in my own mind, like celebrate your wins. Like we deserve it. I sent out an email today, and it was all about, my Monday, like check in with my email list. And I gave everyone a small task, and the small task was take a phrase or a word that you often use to describe yourself, right? Like me,
Mm-hmm.
often I'll be like, oh my God, when I'm stressed out, I'm like, I'm over this. I'm so over it. And it's like, hold on, Renee, are you really over it? Right? How about instead of saying I'm over it, I say something that's a little more positive, that instead of fighting against me, I'm fighting for me. So instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying I'm so over it, I say I'm taking a mental break, right? Like think about the two energies of that are
Mm-hmm.
so different. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when I say I'm taking a mental break, I feel like I'm like my own teammate as
Yes.
opposed to being like, oh, I'm over it. I'm a mess. I'm like, blah, blah, right?
Yep.
And that's what this writing will do for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't get to the step of writing, taking the pen out and just, ask yourself the question in your head, how am
Mm-hmm.
I feeling? Right? Because it's like you deserve, just like you would check in on your loved one, you deserve to check in with yourself.
Absolutely. And it can also give you tips as to how to face your day. Because if
Yes.
you wake up and you're having a difficult time, well, most likely, if you don't put that on paper or you don't get that out, you're carrying that all day,
Yes.
right? And it becomes this cross we bear rather than us going, okay, this is how I feel today. I'm going to blurt it all out on this page.
Totally.
Oh, I feel good, right?
Yes.
When you get it out and you're like, okay, bring on the day.
You guys, let me tell you something. I, had a really tough period of my life, like these past 6 7 months. I lost my father, a lot of things. It kind of was like one thing after another,
Mm-hmm.
and I had this day where, there's a situation in my life, with someone very close to me that we're now estranged. And it like got to a day where it was like so too much, right? I'm dealing with my father. I'm taking him back and forth to the doctor. He had cancer, and it just was a lot.
Yeah.
And I took out a pen and paper because I felt like I was fuming, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I was at my parents' house. I was like, Mom, I need a little bit. And you guys, I wrote, it was probably like a 3-page letter.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I was never going to send it, but I needed to get everything going on in my brain out on that piece of paper because
Mm-hmm.
I could feel it eating me alive. And I kid you not, that was like an hour I took, because it was like a lot of stuff. And I walked out of the bedroom and I was like, thank dear God that I just did that, because I felt like all of a sudden I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never, the letter was just for me to have a cathartic session, but like it is so powerful because
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to, like you said, carry it around. And the only one that affects is you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
There's a saying, something about poison, and
Oh, if
Resentment is,
yeah. Or yes, forgiveness. Oh no, it's about forgiveness. It's basically like it's the equivalent of you taking poison and thinking it's going to kill the other person.
yeah.
Something
Yeah,
along
something
that.
along that line.
But yes, but it's true. It's like when you carry around the anger, the resentment, and trust me, I know it's easy to do, but when you carry that around, it's only negatively affecting you and your health.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? So
Well, and
if that's not an impetus to try to forgive for yourself, then nothing is.
yeah, and I think there's a misnomer about forgiveness because, especially when people have been in abusive relationships or abusive parents or, something happening traumatic through their childhood, they're like, are you kidding me? I'm not forgiving. And they think that it means you're condoning, but it has nothing to do with condoning somebody's actions or how they treated you. It's about
Letting
cutting.
yourself off the hook.
Yeah, and cutting those ties. So, there was a healer that I did a workshop with, and he talked about the same thing about writing letters and just pour it all out. He said, come at it from a place of love because you don't want to come at it from a place of venom, like it being venomous. But it's, you've done this in my life and I've learned a lot of lessons, but here's all the reasons why you piss me off, right?
Yeah.
And you just you let it all out. And then his actions went even further because he said, don't send it.
Yeah.
But he actually said, don't write it on the computer, pen the page, right?
Yes.
Because we tend to, a lot of emotions come out of our fingers, right?
Yes.
Because it's connected to our heart.
Yeah.
And he said, take that letter and burn it.
Burn it.
Right? And that action of that letter going up in smoke, that is literally cutting the cord.
Yeah.
I have written so many of those.
Oh my God, I know. And that's what I mean. I was on a call, with some clients, and the one woman said, she's like, I don't like writing. Like, I don't want to write. And I said, listen, that's okay, but give yourself the chance to try it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the problem is, as humans, it's very natural to stick in our comfort zones, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am comfortable with hiding. I am comfortable with pushing feelings down. And it's like, really the question comes down to, well, how's that working out for you? Right? Like, how are you feeling?
I love
Right?
that.
Like, well, okay, great. You could stick with that, but well, then why are we talking? Because you're obviously not happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to point fingers, because we all do that. It's easy, right? It's natural to want to feel comfortable, but not until we step out of the perimeters of the comfort zone do we start to open up our eyes and our minds and grow and release. And that's what this is doing. So even if you're someone out there and you're like, I don't do anything unless it's on my computer, just try. Just try.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, 5 minutes, which is nothing if you think about it. It really is nothing.
Totally.
And I started off my healing journey doing exactly what you said. And I even bought a journal that was called the 5-minute journal.
Yes.
Because
I love it.
then I thought I have no excuse not to do it. And it was literally, you woke up and you wrote 3 things that you were grateful for. You wrote something you're looking forward to in your day. And then at the end of the day, you wrote about, 3 things that you can remember that brought you joy or that whatever. And some days it was hard to figure that out. Some days I was grateful for coffee in my mug in the morning, like just because I had such a hard time or I was in a bad place that morning. But it really forced me to have to self-evaluate.
Yes. And this is what's beautiful about it. Oh, see, I always get chills when I it's like, I feel like it's like someone speaking through me, but like, there's no right or wrong answer, right?
Yeah.
This isn't like, okay, guys, so you have to write, how am I feeling? And then I grade you. No, the point is just ask the damn question, right? There is no right answer. This is for you. It's actually for the subconscious to come out, really, because we think we're in control. We're not. Most of the world is walking through this life thinking that they're in control, and It's not. Their past traumas are in control, and their fears and their anxieties are in control.
And
And
those
by
limiting beliefs that
yes,
replay, they keep
yes,
replaying.
this is so powerful because it's so easy to do.
Hmm.
Simply, again, because if we don't have the time to take 5 minutes for ourselves, then we have bigger problems, because
Yes.
then we're not showing up for, if it's about other people, right? We're not showing up our best for them,
Hmm.
and it's just simply about acknowledging it. And there's nothing that has to be solved. Even if 5 things come up that you're like, this bothers me and I'm pissed about this, great. But now, we'll find time to deal with it, but at least it's come up,
Hmm.
you know?
Well, and ask any human on the planet, when is everything fully resolved in your life that you're just off on your merry little way,
No?
right? Like even those who are religious, Jesus didn't even have an easy path, right?
No.
And so when you think that you're looking for that perfection, that life, well, that doesn't exist. We are constantly in a work in progress.
That's it. Always. This is what I say, and I was just telling a client, I'm going to write this on a nice poster somewhere, but the juice is in the journey.
Yeah.
That's where the juice of life lies.
Hmm.
And again, I can only speak from experience, but being a perfectionist, thinking like, this has to be perfect and then everything's fine. Like, I do this well, and then everything's perfect. No, 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 no. The juice is in the journey, and that means the
Hmm.
highs and the lows, right?
Hmm.
Because again, the people who are out there teaching, coaching, the mentors we look up to, they've gone through it.
Hmm.
Otherwise, why are we listening? Right? Like, think
Hmm.
about it. Like, that's like me, being a singer and a dancer and an actor, talking to you about engineering. If you listen to me, I hope you ask for your money back, because I couldn't tell you the first 2 things about engineering, right?
Hmm.
But it's the same type of thing. Like, if we don't really take our journey and every piece of it appreciate, as hard as that is,
Hmm.
oh, it's so hard in the down moments, right? But
Hmm.
the blessing is when you look from hindsight. I know for me, I always turn back and go, oh, that had to have happened for
Yes.
this to happen, for
Yes.
Dika and I to be sitting here, for all these amazing people
Hmm.
to be listening, right? Everything had to fit together. And
Hmm.
I wouldn't be able to talk about the importance of communication if I didn't have very hard things in my life happen because of a lack of communication.
Hmm. And a lack of communication with self, right? Like just
Ooh,
giving yourself
oh,
those opportunities. And I know firsthand, I avoided myself for 40 years,
yep.
right? I avoided dealing with things. There are parts of my past I have no recollection of, that I blocked out. And when, I talk in my opening about traumas are what sort of sent me on a different path. And so when all those things happened, my life came crashing down. And a friend of mine said something to me, and it has resonated so much. She said, sometimes the universe has to hit you in the head with a 2x4 because you weren't listening to the messages before. And when she said that to me, I was like, holy
Yeah.
crap.
Yeah.
Like,
Why do you think it's like, why the same lessons come up over and over again, right? Or you're
yes.
oh, not this again, not this again. It's because the universe is like, you gonna deal with this time? No? Okay,
No?
I'll be back. How about this time, right? And it and
Yes.
it sucks because sometimes you're like, this is getting worse, but
And you,
it's almost like, the universe is pushing our back up against the wall
mhm.
until we have no choice but to be like, all right, I'm facing you. All right, fine. I'll face the demons that are within me. I will face the fear because I can't take dealing with this anymore.
Mhm. I
Like,
was
there's
gonna.
some like stuff I'm dealing with where I'm like, I honestly, what universe, all right, how do I get past this? Because I'm sick of this happening, right? Like,
It gets to a point of surrender.
that's
All
it.
right, you
Accept.
win.
That's it.
Yeah, I was joking. I was gonna say the
Yeah,
universe could be from Jersey.
yeah, right. Oh, definitely. I think so.
um, but it's interesting because when in looking back at my life, and I call it the sort of the before trauma or before my breakdown.
Yeah.
I look and I'm like, oh, I was totally running from myself, right? I was totally avoiding myself. I was putting myself into work. I was working crazy hours, and I was, and I was successful, and things looked good on the outside. But
Yeah.
it wasn't until the universe kicked my ass that I was forced to face myself.
Yep.
And I was forced to do all these things that were uncomfortable because the only way out was through.
Yeah.
And it was in realizing that and then that happening to me that now I can look at all those traumas and I am grateful for them. And I
That's
know that sounds weird, but
oh
I am so grateful for all those things that happened, because where would I be if I stayed in denial, if I stayed in that black box and I wasn't venturing out and starting to learn to love me and to accept me and to move forward. So it scares me to think of, I'd probably be dead at this point if I
yeah.
hadn't.
Well, if you think of it like this, I talk to my mom a lot about this. I I tell her, like, when she worries a lot about health things, and she kind of feels like she deals with the same things, over and over again, and I say the same thing, Mom, that's the universe, God, trying to help you,
Mm-hmm.
get out of this pattern. And I say to her so often, I go, Mom, if you could realize this life is a school, and we are students in the school of
Uh-huh.
life.
I like that.
And the goal is to learn and to grow. Like, otherwise, why did we ever go to school, right? Traditionally,
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to learn, we're trying to grow. And if we stay stuck, if
Mm-hmm.
we think we're going to be the same person, then we have other things coming, because the only constant in life is change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we want to up level. Like, these part of the 3 steps that I teach, it's all about like up leveling, especially after this quarantine, right?
Oh,
I
yes.
think about the quarantine, like, okay, who do I want to be when the doors to the quarantine, when the doors to life are opened again, and I like
Mm-hmm.
picture myself reemerging? Who do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I want to be? I definitely want to be better than I was when this all started,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I do that? By communicating with myself.
Mm-hmm.
By, I have this practice of, we're all home right now, we have extra time, of when I think of someone and they come to mind, pick up the phone and call them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead of doing the usual, being like, nah, and put it out of my mind and then go about my day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why not get into the habit of taking action,
Mm-hmm.
picking up the phone, even though it seems scary, my friends, because we're used to texting and whatnot? Just pick up the phone,
Mm-hmm.
because what this does is gets us into the habit of doing it before we have time to negotiate. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
also, we have the opportunity to, who knows where the conversation will go. The person on the other end may be feeling so lonely, and they get your phone call, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I was feeling so down. You just made my day.
Mm-hmm.
Or it may be someone, that you haven't talked to in your own business, and you guys reconnect and think of an idea and you collaborate. Or guess what? There's no downside to this. If the person picks up the phone and you're like, oh, I forgot they were kind of a jerk, at least now you never call them again, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's part of this habit forming with these simple steps of just saying, all right, I'm going to start to take action.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do things even when I'm scared. And again, if you're someone dealing with PTSD, dealing with extreme anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
try just holding the phone in your hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Holding the phone in your hand. Maybe get to the point where you're dialing, right? And then hang up. If that's too much, okay, that's fine. Celebrate that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you get to the point where you're like, I'm going to call somebody, call your person who's your safe person, right?
Mm.
That's a friend, your mom, your AA sponsor,
Yeah.
whoever it is.
Yeah.
You call them, maybe make it a second. Hey, I just needed to do this for myself. I have to go.
Mm-hmm.
But what you just did is so impressive, because you took action,
Mm-hmm.
right? You did it in spite of the fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that is how we grow, we get better, we up level.
Mm-hmm. And even if you don't consciously think it, you get off that call, or, you put down the phone, and even if it feels like it wasn't a huge win, it's still a win. And
Still in.
you still feel a little bit of pride.
Yes.
There's just a little spark, and that's enough, right? Every fire starts with a spark.
And
So
when you add them up, Diva, right? Isn't it?
yeah,
You and I had talked about this. Guys, whenever you have a win, write it down. Because
yeah,
if you're anything like me, when you're in kind of like the downward place where you're like beating yourself up or you're just having a bad day, I know for me, I forget every good thing I've ever done in my life. All of a sudden, I'm like, I don't know I do nothing right. And then guess what I do, guys? Pull out my journal and I look at my list, which, like these pads or journals that we have, they're like a mirror for us to show us who we really are when we don't know it for ourselves. So when I'm feeling down or upset or I'm grieving and I just feel like I can't see past the cloud, I look at my journal and I go, wow, I forgot I did that this week. I called my aunt. I made her so happy. You know what else I did? I honored myself. I took care of myself this week. I forgot I did all that. Good for me. And the more
mhm,
you add up these little wins, the more you get into a momentum of being like, okay, I freaking know what I'm doing. I could do this. I'm amazing. And you start being your own cheerleader,
mhm.
which is what we all deserve.
Yep. And it starts becoming muscle memory, right?
Yep.
It starts becoming second nature. We don't think
Yeah.
about it anymore.
Yep.
Everything we've ever built, that's how we learn to walk as a kid, right? We have to form the muscles to be stable on our feet.
That's it.
And then once we get it, we have a little bit of practice, boom, try and stop us, right? And so it's the same thing with anything, but even this, right?
Totally.
It's all about taking one little step,
One
one
little step.
movement forward.
That's it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. Oh my gosh, you and I could talk for like hours and
Live
hours.
forever.
I have
Forever.
one last question
Yes.
for you, and it wasn't on the list of
Ah,
questions that we talked about. What is your go-to self-care that you do for you in those moments of stress? Or like, is it a bath? Is it a glass of wine? Is it a what does Renee do to say,
the first,
I'm taking care of
yeah.
me?
So first thing is writing.
Mm,
Honestly, taking out my journal because it's just for me, it is so cathartic. It's so healing, cathartic. It's like, just getting it out. Because for me, what happens is, again, like there's so much I want to do, and like I want to do this and I want to do that, and sometimes it's like all like spinning.
mhm,
And when I write it, it allows, like I said, I just picture it as like getting out. Sometimes it's so hard, and I feel like what we deal with, whether you're dealing with like a mental disorder or a mental PTSD, whatever it may be, is you feel so stuck because you're in your own brain, right? So like
mhm,
you're like, well, you feel like you're in this little container. And
mhm,
for me, when I write, I'm like, okay, there it is in front of me.
mhm,
All right, I feel better because at least it's out. And then I go take a bath. I
mhm,
love my baths. I'm like a little kid.
mhm, mhm.
My girlfriends always laugh at me because, like, every time they talk to me, it could be in the quarantine, you guys. I'm loving this because it'll be like 2 in the afternoon and I'm in the bathtub. Like, I have a
Nice.
little table. I even like set up my workstation. But that makes me feel good too. But
Yeah,
writing and taking a bath.
that's amazing. I
Yeah.
love it. Well, we are going to have to do this again
Yeah.
because we touched on sort of like communication with self today. And
Yeah.
I know there's a whole other facet to what you do
Oh,
in
yes.
terms of communicating with other people and how
Absolutely.
to do those things effectively. So you're coming back, lady friend.
Yeah, baby. Woo!
Yeah. So thank you so much for making this such an amazing experience, and for just, giving your wisdom and your love. And I hope everybody else can feel the energy that I do from you, because you are infectious. If we could bottle you,
Oh,
we need to
thank
make a
you.
cajillion dollars. Just saying.
Thank you, my friend. Honestly, this has been so special for me. I love, love, love talking to you, and I can't wait to come back.
Yay. Okay, we'll plan that soon. Mwah.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you so much.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.